Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: a know-it-all and tattletale coworker is arrested by the sheriff. The second story: my duty to the guest experience allowed me to inform them that they could rate us. Trash guest experience is greater than trash reputation. The third story: supervisor criticized employee's workload is too light, prompting them to find a new job with a higher salary. The first story is... What's your name again? Names changed to protect the innocent and the very, very stupid. Many moons ago, I worked at a now defunct convenience store/gas station in the Midwest. I was initially a bit reticent to take a job at a convenience store, because it was just the sort of place that you always hear about getting robbed. However, it was new, brightly lit, clean, and on a very busy road. Also, I needed a second job pronto because university is expensive, and girls gotta eat. Ramen and peanut butter only goes so far. After I started working there, I quickly realized that my worries about being robbed were probably unfounded, as my store was somehow the meeting point for all the police. The local city cops, the county sheriff, and even detectives all wandered into my store multiple times a day. They would stand around and chat with the staff or just stop in for a snack or drink on the way to work. This comes into play later. So while I didn't have to worry about robbers and I actually kind of enjoyed the job, there was one major annoyance. I got along well with all the employees, but one, his name was Branson. Branson was in his early 20s, fairly well spoken and intelligent, but wouldn't you know it, he just knew everything. Since he knew everything, it was obvious that the Lord Almighty had put him on this earth to tell everyone else about everything. No matter what you were talking about, he knew more and better than you, even on matters involving your own history. You wouldn't think that was possible, but by God, he had an opinion about the cafeteria in the hospital my mother worked in when I was a child. Not a joke, he really did. While he wasn't the first know-it-all I'd met, he had an even more annoying personality trait. Branson was a tattletale. You didn't stock the coolers before he got there? Tattle. Didn't clean the bathrooms before he came in? Tattle. Didn't make more coffee? Tattle. No matter how minor or downright wrong he was, he just had to run and tell management. As such, they were just as annoyed by him as the lowly cashiers. Once he almost got me fired by telling the managers that I allowed one of my friends to steal from the store. Luckily, we were absolutely lousy with cameras. So after a few minutes of desperate pleading for the manager to check the CCTV footage, they discovered that Branson was in fact full of it, not lying for his own amusement. When it was proved he was wrong, did he apologize? Of course not. He was never wrong in all of his livelong days, because he, of course, knew everything. I was, as they say, not remotely fond of Branson. One day the store was filled with law enforcement as per usual, 2 sheriffs and 4 or 5 local city cops. It was at shift changeover and me and my coworker were ready to hand off our shift to Branson. There were no other customers, so we were all standing around talking and just enjoying the banter. It just so happened that the sheriff's supervisor was there. His name was Bucky. Bucky was a good old boy, salt of the earth and one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. He'd give you the shirt off his back if he thought you looked a bit chilly. Now, while I was chatting with some of the other boys in blue, Bucky was talking to Branson. I wasn't entirely listening to their conversation until it started to go a bit pear-shaped. Bucky was talking about something and Branson, in his usual way, just had to start arguing with him that he was wrong, because Branson just knew that it was X instead of Y. Then he took it a step further and suggested that as a lawman, Bucky didn't have the schooling that Branson did, and it was only natural that Branson would know more about the subject. Bucky just smiled, and rather than argue, he removed himself from the conversation and walked around the counter to the other side. He caught my eye and motioned me over. He then asked me what Branson's last name was, and not seeing any reason not to, I told him. He thanked me and drifted off into the store. I honestly didn't think anything more about it, and went back to my conversation with the others. After a few minutes, Bucky walked up with a vaguely puzzled look on his face and asked Branson, "Hey buddy, what was your name again?" Branson, sounding a little annoyed, and as if he were schooling a child, answered him. Again, Bucky walked back off into the store. When Bucky returned, he had a big old grin on his face. He motioned Branson to come to him from behind the counter and said, "Your name was Branson last name, right?" Branson confirmed it was, and Bucky's grin widened further as he reached for the handcuffs on his belt. "I'm so happy to hear that because there's a warrant out for your arrest, and I'm gonna have to take you in. I'm gonna need you to turn around for me and put your hands behind your back." At that, all the conversation died entirely. I exchanged a well-earned shocked Pikachu face with my coworker. The shocked expressions on our faces melted away into absolute delight, as our most annoying coworker was handcuffed and taken out of the store. I never did see Branson again, but Bucky was back later that evening and apologized to me for making me stay late. I told him I didn't mind and it was all worth it for the show. I'd have done it all over again just to see an idiot sabotage himself. Life tip: if you've got a warrant out for your arrest, probably best if you don't annoy a cop. Huh, I couldn't stop laughing after reading your story. It was hilarious. I have to hand it to you. Your storytelling skills are amazing. Branson sounds like a real piece of work, but it's great that justice was served in the end. It's amazing how karma can come around and bite someone in the butt. I can just imagine the look on Branson's face when he was handcuffed and taken away. It's too bad that you didn't get to see his reaction after he had been arrested. I also love how the police officers were regular customers at the store, and that they were able to get back at Branson for his know-it-all attitude. It's always satisfying to see someone who thinks they're better than everyone else get their comeuppance. The second story is, we don't care that you're understaffed. Everyone gets priority treatment. This was a while ago, before I managed to claw my way out of the hotel industry. I used to work in a hotel with about 1,000 rooms. All employees were being cross-trained when I came on board, which essentially meant rather than hiring enough people, every idle 5 minutes was to be spent helping out one of the other drowning departments. Most of my time was either dedicated to service or reception, but we got plenty of housekeeping and tech department odd jobs thrown our way too. This was pretty normal since tech were by far the smallest department, around 3 people for 1,000 cheaply constructed rooms, and housekeeping were also tiny for the impossible amount of work they had to do. So what duties could be expected in reception? Replace door batteries, light bulbs, unclog drains. Restock tea and coffee, coffee makers, kettles, hair dryers, TP, anything guests were missing or ran out of after they checked in. Room service for any COVID isolation cases. Ticket stubbing for events. Manning the bar. Garage duties. There was a whole rental thing going on, and properly returned rentals were a rarity. Anything else that was flung at us with the label urgent, like room tours and occasionally even making our own staff lunches. Ignoring our repeated request to cut down the number of available rooms until we had enough staff to actually provide the service we advertised, management also informed us we were there to placate the after-sales cases. Disgruntled customers rightly peeved off that they don't get what they're promised. So after months of going by the book, I finally found myself a comfortable little loophole. Any tech or housekeeping issue is obviously higher priority than reception, since, for example, not having toilet paper or working lights and drains indoors was an unacceptable condition for guests. So waiting 2 hours to be checked in or book breakfast were preferable by far. Having 2 to 3 receptionists on shift to man 3 phones, emails, scanners, and printers for guest registrations. Yeah, we still had one foot in the 90s. And troubleshoot reservations. One of us would be on the desk checking people in. If another was available, they'd be on digital responses, just taking one call after another while working through emails. And I would take every single tech and housekeeping job that came. If any of us received complaints, we'd explain the situation. I'm sorry, but there's currently an emergency. Insert technical/HSK issue here. That will have to take priority. If you'd be so kind as to wait in line until my colleague comes back, he'll see you upon his return. I'm pretty resilient when I don't give an F anymore, so I told them to put any difficult guests in my line too unless their problem was high priority. Whenever I got back, I'd have 30 minutes to 2 hours to work through the line before the next thing would come up and I'd apologetically leave. When they demanded an explanation or just started yelling, I'd simply explain our duties and say I fully agree that this is not a comfortable condition for guests to be in, and they in turn would agree that providing toilet paper and other essentials needed to come first. Naturally wanting to provide all customers with the tools to improve their future experience, I always rounded off these kinds of conversations with a warm thank you, and if you can think of any suggestions that might improve your and other guests' future experiences here, please let us know on TripAdvisor. Feedback of any nature is always valuable to us. Reviews came flooding in that were either talking about a massive dip in quality or how understaffed and poorly managed the place was, but funnily enough, I never heard one bad word against the staff. Management didn't make a big change to the hiring policy, so I eventually left. But last I heard, almost everyone had quit not long after I did, and the place has since rebranded, presumably to get away from the rating that dropped a couple stars. Your story had me laughing out loud. I love your clever loophole for dealing with the overwhelming workload at the hotel. Who needs to check in guests promptly when you can fix toilets and unclog drains, am I right? And kudos to you for handling difficult guests like a pro. I'm sure they never expected to be put in their place by a receptionist doubling as a handyman. Your approach may not have pleased management, but it certainly made for some entertaining reviews. And the last story is, I was told my workload is too light by a supervisor, so I took another job. So just as some background, I work at a financial company in Texas on their data team. I actually really liked the company and was treated well until our team's supervisor left in early December. The company desperately needed someone in this position, so they hired a new supervisor relatively quickly. Before I met the new supervisor, my manager even said the new hire wasn't his first or even second pick, which was concerning. When the new supervisor started, the atmosphere of our small 5-person data team changed overnight. The new supervisor started mandatory team meetings every morning at 8 a.m. The meetings were only supposed to go 5 to 10 minutes to talk about the day, but it was rare if they went under an hour because the new supervisor had no idea what she was doing. So she needed everyone on the team to show her and explain to her what she should be working on. After our 1 to 2 hour morning meeting, it was extremely common for her to reach out during the day and need us to stop what we're doing and Zoom or walk her through something that should be common knowledge, which would take anywhere from another 30 minutes to an hour or two. All these disruptions really started to affect the team's productivity, as we would have to cancel actual data and project-related meetings to explain a simplistic concept to this new supervisor. I hated it, my manager hated it, the rest of the team hated it, but it was now this new supervisor's department, and this is how she wanted to run it. The final straw was about 2 weeks ago. Everyone else on my team was out sick or on PTO, so it was only myself and the new supervisor in the morning meeting. I was explaining different topics to her and answering any questions she had. She even was writing down verbatim what I was saying about a specific piece of software, because she was having a meeting later that day with the executive team, and she still had no idea how it worked, even though she's been at the company over a month now. After about 45 minutes of answering her questions, I told her what data projects and data pulls for different departments I was working on for the day. About 3 to 4 big projects going on. After I finished explaining, she looked at me and said, "This seems like a light workload. What else do you do?" I was completely floored and I mentioned a few smaller items, but I was seriously speechless and fuming after that meeting. I took that anger out by starting to apply for other jobs. As many people know, the market is extremely hot right now. I always thought those stories of people getting an offer a week later were unrealistic, but I can honestly say I had so much interest from different companies I was able to pin 2 companies against each other to make the highest offer the fastest, and I ended up getting an offer letter for $30K, over my current salary just this past Monday. So on Tuesday morning, as our morning meeting came to an end, I asked my supervisor to stay on the call as everyone else dropped off. I told her I've really been thinking about her comment on my level of workload, and told her I agree I should have a higher workload. At that point, I told her I've accepted a new position at a new company, and wanted to let her know I'm putting in my 2 weeks. At that point, she started backtracking hard, saying things like I was only joking, and I only meant your workload for that day, which doesn't make any sense, and I held firm. So that's where I am right now. It's not like the company will fall apart if I leave, but it's just a small victory for me. I stood up for myself because I knew I deserved better than being gaslighted by my supervisor, and now I'm excited to get out of here, and that new pay bump will really help out my family. Hey OP, it seems like you took that light workload comment a little too seriously, but you definitely showed your supervisor who's boss. It's great to see you standing up for yourself and finding a better opportunity elsewhere. Who knew getting paid more could be so satisfying? Best of luck in your new role. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.